I have just upgraded my Micro Four Thirds camera just now. Since 2014, I kind of stopped doing camera reviews because I got the best camera in the world, the Panasonic GH4. And for property photography, this has done fantastically. With the 7 to 14mm lens, it's done the business, and it still is doing the business. However, I've upgraded to not brand new, but much more new, the Panasonic G9, wow! Straight away, before I do any kind of like video reviews of this, it's a bigger, chunkier camera. The top LCD screen is lovely to use. It's a couple of the settings are a little bit different. Need to figure them out. It's a very sensitive shutter. But what this camera has actually blown me away with is the in-camera image stabilization. So I haven't ever used a digital SLR or a Micro Four Thirds or an APS-C size camera with in-camera image stabilization. I was a Nikon user for a long time, and they were all about putting image stabilization in the lens. And I just haven't upgraded my Panasonic since 2014, so I haven't had a chance to play with any of the cameras that I've got in-camera image stabilization. So the 7 to 14mm lens has no image stabilization. So for me, when I'm doing property photography, if I'm inside a property, I try and not go below a 15th of a second, doesn't really matter if I'm using 50th of a second there. See, it's already bright as anything at f4 ISO 400. So I rarely need to go below a 50th of a second. Let's see if there's any of the darker rooms. Here's a nice dark room, 200th of a second. Once I get to the right exposure, still 200th of a second. So yeah, just changing the flash speed there. But I thought I'll just have a little test of how good the image stabilization is handheld, because that's how I do all my property photography, and see what I can get away with. And I would say, in my best situation, my best still hand holding, I would probably go down to a 15th, maybe I don't know if I'd go to a 10th. I'd go to a 10th of a second if I was holding it against the wall and I had maybe I was leaning against a wall of some sorts. But no, this blew me away. So I went into the stairwell after shooting this property and took some photos, and I am amazed. So the exposure changes here because I was just changing the shutter speed. But if you look in a 30th of a second, image seems kind of fine, a little bit underexposed. 15th of a second, I would say it looks sharper, actually, strangely. This is just looking at the JPEGs because I haven't upgraded to see the RAWs yet. Here, at a 6th of a second handheld, I was like, damn, that's clean. Like, all of that is clean. There's nothing to complain about there. I went to 0.4 of a second handheld, and that is crystal sharp. I thought, can I go for a whole second exposure? And there is. Is there any difference at all? It's a brighter exposure, but in terms of sharpness, there's nothing changes. That is absolutely astonishing. So, handheld, a 1 second exposure for like a dark stairwell, which normally would have looked like that, turns out looking like that, and the image is equally as sharp. So I was very impressed with that. I then went to another property, took some nice externals, and again, 250th of a second, 350th of a second, all nice and sharp. I went into the underground garage. First shot, 5th of a second. I obviously moved far too much. So me using my best skill as a internal photographer, holding the camera still as I can, a 5th of a second again. Let's see. The example is, can we read this number plate over here? Yes, we can. So that's good. A fifth of a second. 0.6 of a second. Can't see any degradation in the image at all. 1.3 seconds. Possibly there's a slight drop in exposure. Oh, but also I am having to go to f10 here. This is for an underground car park at ISO 200, going from f7.1 to f10. So the degrading of the image may not necessarily be due to shake, but due to just chromatic lens problems. I then went up to 2-second exposure. I'm having to be at f13 here. That is astonishing. If we read the fire exit stair, if we see the difference between that and the first shot, there's no difference. A 2-second handheld exposure. Here, I went for 2.5 seconds. The cameras had to shut down to f14 for an underground car park for 2.5 second handheld exposure, and I can't tell the difference between that and a fifth of a second. Amazing! I after I took these photos, I called up a fellow photographer and said, "Oh my goodness, have you tried this out yet?" And they're like, "No, I haven't tried out its exposure." So I was like, "Hold on, this is amazing." And I thought maybe that was just a freak occurrence. So I went back down into the car park space again afterwards. I thought, right, let's just try this again. So here, what's a good example of trying to read something? Can I read the text on that? Okay, so yeah, again, the number plate here, good example. A 60th of a second, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Let's go for from 60th to 1 whole second handheld. There's no difference. It's amazing. And then let's see, what did I get up to here? I'm having to go down to f10 and then f16 for a 2.5 second exposure. That is amazing. Having to go to f16 is insane. Not something that you'd ever use. I don't think I bothered taking any more examples. Took a stairwell shot again at 1/3 of a second. Just absolutely amazing. Having in-camera image stabilization or sensor stabilization, meaning that you've got image stabilization with every lens that you use, but for property photography, handheld, going down to easily 1/2 second exposure, but in my case, getting it down to a 2-second exposure and a 2.5 second exposure, and having absolutely adequate images there. Amazing. And probably the biggest degrading of the image is the fact that I'm at f16, because the Micro Four Thirds cameras, their lenses are probably at their peak, at their maximum aperture, at f4. But that was just absolutely mind-blowing. So, again, people have probably been rocking the Sony cameras with their image sensor stabilization, all that stuff. So you've had it easy for quite a long time. But this just absolutely blew me away. A 2.5 second exposure handheld in an underground car park, everything sharp. Amazing. Cannot recommend the Panasonic G9 enough. What an amazing camera. So far, only one day of shooting with it, but blown away.